The Founding Fathers of the United States of America were political leaders and statesmen who participated in the American Revolution by signing the United States Declaration of Independence, taking part in the American Revolutionary War, and establishing the United States Constitution. Within the large group known as the Founding Fathers, there are two key subsets: the signers of the Declaration of Independence and the framers of the Constitution. A further subset is the group that signed the Articles of Confederation. Some historians define the Founding Fathers to mean a larger group, including not only the signers and the framers but also all those who, whether as politicians, jurists, statesmen, soldiers, diplomats, or ordinary citizens, took part in winning American independence and creating the United States of America. Historian Richard B. Morris in 1973 identified the following 7 figures as the key Founding Fathers: John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and George Washington. 3 of these were authors of the Federalist Papers, advocating ratification of the Constitution. The phrase Founding Fathers applied to an American statesman of the Revolutionary period, ESP. A member of the American Constitutional Convention of 1,787 inches, has been in use since at least 1894. A more generalized use of Founding Fathers has been in place since at least 1886. Background: the First Continental Congress met briefly in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1774 and consisted of 56 delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies that would become the United States of America. The delegates, who included George Washington, soon to command the Army, Patrick Henry, and John Adams, were elected by their respective colonial assemblies. Other notable delegates included Samuel Adams from Massachusetts, John Dickinson from Pennsylvania and New York's John Jay. This Congress, in addition to formulating appeals to the British Crown, established the Continental Association to administer boycott actions against Britain. When the Second Continental Congress came together on May 10, 1775, it was, in effect, a reconvening of the First Congress. Many of the same 56 delegates who attended the first meeting participated in the second. Notable new arrivals included Benjamin Franklin and Robert Morris of Pennsylvania, John Hancock of Massachusetts, and John Witherspoon of New Jersey. Hancock was elected Congress President 2 weeks into the session when Peyton Randolph was summoned back to Virginia to preside over the House of Burgesses. Thomas Jefferson replaced Randolph in the Virginia congressional delegation. The Second Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. Witherspoon was the only active clergyman to sign the Declaration. He also signed the Articles of Confederation and attended the New Jersey Convention that ratified the federal Constitution. The newly founded country of the United States had to create a new government to replace the British Parliament. The Americans adopted the Articles of Confederation, a declaration that established a national government which was made up of a one-house legislature. Its ratification by all 13 colonies gave the Second Congress a new name, the Congress of the Confederation, which met from 1781 to 1789. Later, the Constitutional Convention took place in 1787, in Philadelphia. Although the convention was called to revise the Articles of Confederation, the intention from the outset of many of its proponents, chief among them James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, was to create a new government rather than try to fix the inadequate existing one. The delegates elected George Washington to preside over the convention. The result of the convention was the United States Constitution. Collective biography of the framers of the Constitution. In the winter and spring of 1786 1787, 12 of the 13 states chose a total of 74 delegates to attend what is now known as the Federal Convention in Philadelphia. 19 delegates chose not to accept election or attend the debates. For example, Patrick Henry of Virginia thought that state politics were far more interesting and important than national politics, though during the ratification controversy of 1787 he claimed, "I smelled a rat." Rhode Island did not send delegates because of its politicians' suspicions of the convention delegates' motivations. As a sanctuary for Baptists, Rhode Island's absence at the convention in part explains the absence of Baptist affiliation among those who did attend. Of the 55 who did attend at some point, no more than 38 delegates showed up at one time. These delegates represented a cross-section of 18th-century American leadership. Almost all of them were well-educated men of means who were leaders in their communities. Many were also prominent in national affairs. Virtually everyone had taken part in the American Revolution. At least 29 had served in the Continental Army, most of them in positions of command. Several of the latter were instrumental in establishing the Society of the Cincinnati in 1783. Scholars have examined the collective biography of them as well as the signers of the Declaration and the Constitution. Political experience. The framers of the Constitution had extensive political experience. By 1787, 4/5 were or had been members of the Continental Congress. Nearly all of the 55 delegates had experience in colonial and state government, and the majority had held county and local offices. Thomas Mifflin and Nathaniel Gorham had served as president of the Continental Congress. The ones who lacked congressional experience were Bassett, Blair, Greeley, Broome, Davie, Dayton, Alexander Martin, Luther Martin, Mason, McClurg, Patterson, Charles Pinckney, Strong, Washington and Yates. 8 men had signed the Declaration of Independence. 6 had signed the Articles of Confederation. 2, Sherman and Robert Morris, signed all 3 of the nation's basic documents. Dickinson, Franklin, Langdon, and Rutledge had been governors. Occupations and finances. The 1787 delegates practiced a wide range of high and middle status occupations, and many pursued more than one career simultaneously. They did not differ dramatically from the Loyalists, except they were generally younger and less senior in their professions. 35 had legal training, though not all of them practiced law. Some had also been local judges. At the time of the convention, 13 men were merchants: Blunt, Broome, Clymer, Dayton, Fitzsimmons, Shields, Gilman, Gorham, Langdon, Robert Morris, Pierce, Sherman, and Wilson. 7 were major land speculators: Blunt, Dayton, Fitzsimmons, Gorham, Robert Morris, Washington and Wilson. 11 speculated in securities on a large scale: Bedford, Blair, Clymer, Dayton, Fitzsimmons, Franklin, King, Langdon, Robert Morris, Charles Cotesworth Pinckney, and Sherman. 14 owned or managed slave-operated plantations or large farms: Bassett, Blair, Blunt, Johnson, Butler, Carroll, Jennifer, Jefferson, Madison, Mason, Charles Pinckney, Charles Cotesworth Pinckney, Rutledge, Speight, and Washington. Many wealthy Northerners owned domestic slaves. Franklin later freed his slaves and was a key founder of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society. Jay founded the New York Manumission Society in 1785, for which Hamilton became an officer. They and other members of the society founded the African Free School in New York City, to educate the children of free blacks and slaves. When Jay was governor of New York in 1798, he signed into law a gradual abolition law, fully ending slavery as of 1827. He freed his own slaves in 1798. Broome and few were small farmers. 8 of the men received a substantial part of their income from public office: Baldwin, Blair, Greeley, Gilman, Livingston, Madison, and Rutledge. 3 had retired from active economic endeavors: Franklin, McHenry, and Mifflin. Franklin and Williamson were scientists, in addition to their other activities. McClurg, McHenry, Rush and Williamson were physicians, and Johnson was a college president. Family and finances. A few of the 1787 delegates were wealthy, but many of the country's top wealth holders were Loyalists who went to Britain. Most of the others had financial resources that ranged from good to excellent, but there are other founders who were less than wealthy. On the whole, they were less wealthy than the Loyalists. Demographics. Brown and Harris provide detailed demographic information on each man. Most of the 1787 delegates were natives of the 13 colonies. Only 9 were born elsewhere, 4 in Ireland, 2 in England, 2 in Scotland, and 1 in the West Indies. many of them had moved from one state to another. 17 individuals had already lived, studied or worked in more than one state or colony: Baldwin, Bassett, Bedford, Dickinson, Few, Franklin, Ingersoll, Hamilton, Livingston, Alexander Martineau, Luther Martin, Mercer, Gouverneur Morris, Robert Morris, Reed, Sherman, and Williamson. Several others had studied or traveled abroad. The Founding Fathers had strong educational backgrounds at some of the colonial colleges or abroad. Some, like Franklin and Washington, were largely self-taught or learned through apprenticeship. Others had obtained instruction from private tutors or at academies. About half of the men had attended or graduated from college. Some men held medical degrees or advanced training in theology. Most of the education was in the colonies, but several were lawyers who had been trained at the Inns of Court in London. Longevity and family life. For their era, the 1787 delegates were average in terms of lifespans. Their average age at death was about 67. The first to die was Houston in 1788. The last was Madison in 1836. Secretary Charles Thompson lived to the age of 94. Johnson died at 92. John Adams lived to the age of 90. A few Franklin, Jefferson, Madison, Williamson, and Wythe lived into their 80s. Either 15 or 16 died in their 70s, 20 or 21 in their 60s, 8 in their 50s, and 5 only in their 40s. 3 were killed in duels. Most of the delegates married and raised children. Sherman fathered the largest family, 15 children by 2 wives. At least 9 married more than once. 4 were lifelong bachelors. Many of the delegates also had children conceived illegitimately. Religion. Lambert has examined the religious affiliations and beliefs of the founders. Of the 55 delegates to the 1787 Constitutional Convention, 49 were Protestants, and 2 were Roman Catholics. Among the Protestant delegates to the Constitutional Convention, 28 were Church of England, 8 were Presbyterians, 7 were Congregationalists, 2 were Lutherans, 2 were Dutch Reformed, and 2 were Methodists. A few prominent Founding Fathers were anti-clerical Christians, such as Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. Others were deists, or at least held beliefs very similar to those of deists. Historian Greg L. Fraser argues that the leading founders were neither Christians nor deists, but rather supporters of a hybrid theistic rationalism. The Treaty of Tripoli states that the government of the United States of America is not, in any sense, founded on the Christian religion, and was passed unanimously by the Senate and signed by President John Adams. Post-convention careers. The 1787 delegates' subsequent careers reflected their abilities as well as the vagaries of fate. Most were successful, although 7 suffered serious financial reverses that left them in or near bankruptcy. 2, Blunt and Dayton, were involved in possibly treasonous activities. Yet, as they had done before the convention, most of the group continued to render public service, particularly to the new government they had helped to create. Slaves and slavery. Many Founding Fathers, including George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin owned slaves. Slaves and slavery are mentioned only indirectly in the 1787 Constitution. For example, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 prescribes that 3/5 of all other persons are to be counted for the apportionment of seats in the House of Representatives and direct taxes. Additionally, in Article 4, Section 2, Clause 3, slaves are referred to as persons held in service or labor. The Founding Fathers, however, did make important efforts to contain slavery. Many northern states had adopted legislation to end or significantly reduce slavery after the American Revolution. In 1782 Virginia passed a manumission law that allowed slave owners to free their slaves by will or deed. As a result, thousands of slaves were manumitted in Virginia. Thomas Jefferson in 1784 proposed to ban slavery in all the Western territories, which failed to pass Congress by 1 vote. Partially following Jefferson's plan, Congress did ban slavery in the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 for territory north of the Ohio River. the international slave trade was banned in all states except South Carolina by 1800. Finally in 1807, President Jefferson signed into law a federally enforced ban on the international slave trade throughout all the United States and territories. President Jefferson, in 1804, however, allowed the domestic expansion or diffusion of slavery into the Louisiana Territory. Legacy. According to the historian Joseph J. Ellis, the concept of the Founding Fathers of the U.S. emerged in the 1820s as the last survivors died out. Ellis says the Founders, or the Fathers, comprised an aggregate of semi-sacred figures whose particular accomplishments and singular achievements were decidedly less important than their sheer presence as a powerful but faceless symbol of past greatness. For the generation of national leaders coming of age in the 1820s and 1830s men like Andrew Jackson, Henry Clay, Daniel Webster, and John C. Calhoun the Founders represented a heroic but anonymous abstraction whose long shadow fell across all followers and whose legendary accomplishments defied comparison. "We can win no laurels in a war for independence," Webster acknowledged in 1825. "Earlier and worthier hands have gathered them all. Nor are there places for us. As the founders of states, our fathers have filled them. But there remains to us a great duty of defense and preservation." The last remaining founders, also called the last of the Romans, lived well into the 19th century. List of the Founding Fathers. See also: List of national founders, History of the United States Constitution, Rights of Englishmen. Notes. References. External links: NARA America's Founding Fathers, Founders Online, Correspondence and other writings of 6 major shapers of the United States, Encyclopaedia Britannica, The Founding Fathers and Slavery, What Happened to the Signers of the Declaration of Independence? What Would the Founding Fathers Do Today? Booknotes interview with Bernard Bailyn on To Begin the World Anew, March 23, 2003.